Thomas looked up from the ledger he'd been studying, his weather-beaten face unreadable. At 43, he'd buried one wife to childbirth and another to typhoid fever. The ranch stretched across 5,000 acres of prairie grass and sky, but the house felt smaller every year, echoing with ghosts and silence. He'd placed that advertisement in the Eastern papers, not because he needed a cook he'd been making do with beans and bacon for 2 years, but because he couldn't stand the quiet anymore. "You came all this way alone?" His voice was rough from disuse, like boots that hadn't been worn in months. Martha nodded, forcing herself to stand straighter despite the ache in her back. "Yes, sir. The wagon master was kind enough to let me travel with his train. I can pay my way with work." She hesitated. Then the words tumbled out in a rushed whisper, as if saying them quickly might soften their impact. "I know what you're thinking, sir. No one loves a fat girl. But I can cook. I can cook better than anyone you've ever met. I can make butter that melts like silk, bread that tastes like heaven, and stews that'll warm you from the inside out. I can keep your house and mend your clothes and—" "Stop!" Thomas held up one calloused hand, and Martha's words died in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. He'd send her away and she'd have nowhere to go. The little money she'd saved from 7 years of kitchen work in Philadelphia was nearly gone. She had no family, no prospects, nothing but the skills in her hands and the desperate hope that somewhere in this vast country there was a place for someone like her. Thomas stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He was taller than she'd expected, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He walked toward her, and Martha braced herself for rejection. Instead, he moved past her to the kitchen doorway and gestured at the room beyond. "That stove hasn't cooked a decent meal in 2 years. The garden's gone to weeds because I don't have time to tend it and run cattle. The bunkhouse boys eat like wolves and complain twice as loud." He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Miss Brennan, I don't care if you're fat, thin, tall, short, pretty, or plain. What I care about is whether you're honest, whether you'll treat my ranch hands with respect, and whether you meant what you said about that cooking." Martha felt something crack open inside her chest, like the first thaw after a brutal winter. "I meant every word, sir." "Then the job's yours. $75 a month, room and board. Sundays off after breakfast's cleared." He extended his hand. "And Miss Brennan, don't ever apologize for who you are in my house again." She took his hand, her own trembling slightly, and felt the strength in his grip, not crushing, but steady, certain. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Thomas, we don't stand on ceremony out here." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Now, I don't suppose you'd be willing to start tonight. The boys are expecting salt pork and beans. But if you can do better, you'll be a hero by morning." Martha felt a genuine smile break across her face for the first time in months. "Give me 2 hours and access to your pantry, and I'll show you what I can do." What she found in the pantry was sparse flour, lard, dried beans, salt pork, a few shriveled potatoes, and some elderly onions. But Martha had learned to cook in a boarding house, kitchen where nothing was wasted and creativity was survival. She set to work with the focused intensity of a woman who'd found her purpose, her hands moving through the familiar rituals of cooking with the grace of a dancer. She rendered the salt pork until it was crispy, then used the fat to caramelize the onions. The potatoes became crispy rounds, fried golden and seasoned with the last of some dried herbs she found in a tin. The dried beans had been soaking all day, Thomas's half-hearted attempt at supper, so she drained them and created a thick, rich stew with the pork, onions, and a splash of vinegar to brighten the flavors. Biscuits rose in the oven, their tops brushing golden brown, and she whipped the remaining lard with a touch of sugar to create something approximating butter. When the ranch hands filed in for supper, they stopped dead in the doorway. The table was set properly for the first time in 2 years. Steam rose from serving dishes, and the smell that filled the room made grown men weak in the knees. "Boss?" A young hand named Billy spoke up, his eyes wide. "Did you go to town?" "Didn't need to." Thomas took his seat at the head of the table. "Boys, this is Miss Martha Brennan, our new cook. Treat her with respect or answer to me." 6 months passed like water flowing downstream, each day settling into a rhythm that felt ancient and right. Martha rose before dawn to start the fires and put coffee on. She packed lunches for the men heading out to check fence lines and doctored calves. She turned Thomas's neglected garden into rows of vegetables that would see them through the winter. She sewed patches on torn jeans, treated barbed wire cuts with salve, and listened to the hands. Stories about far-off homes with the patience of someone who understood loneliness. The ranch began to feel like something more than just a place of work. Laughter returned to the dinner table. Billy started bringing her wildflowers from the prairie. Old Pete, the cook's helper, taught her how to smoke meat properly. And Thomas began staying for second cups of coffee in the morning, talking about the ranch, the weather, his dreams of breeding better cattle. Martha watched him across the kitchen table as autumn painted the cottonwoods gold and felt something dangerous blooming in her chest. She tried to crush it down. She knew better than to hope for things that weren't meant for women like her, but it grew anyway, stubborn as prairie grass. Then came the day everything changed. A late September storm rolled in fierce and sudden, the kind that could kill cattle and men alike. 3 hands were out checking the north section when the temperature dropped 30 degrees in an hour. Thomas rode out with Billy to bring them home, but his horse spooked at lightning and threw him hard against a boulder. Billy got him home, but Thomas was unconscious and bleeding. His left leg bent at an angle that made Martha's stomach clench. She'd learned frontier medicine from necessity, but this was beyond her skill. The nearest doctor was in Billings, a 2-day ride in good weather, impossible now. So Martha did what she'd always done. She refused to give up. She set the leg as carefully as she could, her hands steady despite her terror, and kept watch through 3 days and nights while Thomas burned with fever. She bathed his forehead with cool water, spooned broth between his lips during the moments he surfaced toward consciousness, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure listened to people like her. The hands tiptoed around the house like mourners, and Martha understood that Thomas wasn't just their boss. He was the backbone of something they'd all built together. On the 3rd night, exhausted and terrified, Martha laid her head on the edge of Thomas's bed and whispered, "Don't you dare leave. Don't you dare make me care about this place, about these people, about you, and then leave." Her voice cracked. "I know I'm not what anyone would choose. I know that. But I'm here, and I'm fighting for you, and you have to fight too." Thomas's eyes opened. They were clearer than they'd been in days, and they focused on her face with an intensity that made her heart stop. "Martha," his voice was barely a rasp, "you think I'd choose anyone else?" She didn't understand, not then. But she stayed by his side, and slowly, stubbornly, Thomas healed. By the time snow dusted the mountains, Thomas was walking again with only a slight limp. The hands prepared for winter, and Martha canned and preserved everything the garden had yielded. The kitchen became the heart of the ranch, warm and bright against the gathering darkness of winter. Thomas found her there on the first Sunday in December, her hands in bread dough, flour dusting her nose. He'd cleaned up, she noticed, shaved, put on his good shirt. "Martha, I need to say something." He looked nervous. This man who faced down storms and wild cattle without flinching. "When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for a cook because I couldn't face the silence anymore. What I found was everything. You brought life back to this house. You made the men remember there's more to living than just surviving. You saved my life, but more than that, you made it worth living again." Martha's hands stilled in the dough. "Thomas, I'm not good with words," he continued, talking faster now. "And I know I'm older and rough around the edges, and this life is hard. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see what you think I see. I see strength. I see kindness. I see the woman who makes this house a home. I see the person I want beside me for whatever years I've got left." He took a breath. "I'm asking if you'd consider being my wife, Martha. Not my cook, my partner, my love." The tears came then, unstoppable, and Martha didn't try to hide them. "I'm fat, Thomas. I'm plain. There are beautiful women who... There's no one else." His voice was fierce. "There's never been anyone else. Not since you walked through that door and refused to apologize for taking up space in the world. You're not fat, Martha. You're substantial. You're real. You're here and you're mine if you'll have me. And I'll spend every day proving that I see you. All of you, and I love every bit." Martha pulled her hands from the dough and wiped them on her apron with shaking fingers. She walked around the table to where Thomas stood, this man who'd given her something more precious than acceptance. He'd given her belonging. She reached up and cupped his weathered face in her flour-dusted hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." They married in the ranch house parlor on Christmas Eve, with snow falling soft outside and all the hands crowded in as witnesses. Martha wore a new dress she'd made herself from blue calico, and Thomas couldn't stop smiling. When the traveling preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything. And for the first time in her life, Martha believed it. The years that followed weren't easy. Ranch life never was, but they were full. Children came, 3 of them, each one learning to cook at their mother's elbow and ride at their father's side. The ranch prospered. The garden grew. The kitchen remained the heart of everything, warm with bread and laughter and the kind of love that grows deeper with time. And on Sunday mornings, when the house was quiet and the coffee was hot, Thomas would pull Martha close and whisper, "You were wrong, you know." "About what?" "About nobody loving a fat girl." He'd kiss her temple. "I love you. The children love you. Everyone on this ranch loves you. But most importantly, you finally love yourself. And that's the thing that makes everything else possible." Martha would smile against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of coffee and home and the man who'd taught her that. She was always enough exactly as she was. Outside, the Montana prairie stretched endlessly toward the horizon, full of possibility and promise and the quiet truth that real love has nothing to do with size or shape or society's narrow definitions. Real love sees the soul, honors the work of willing hands, and cherishes the courage it takes to keep showing up, day after day, even when the world suggests you shouldn't. That's the thing about love, Martha learned. It doesn't arrive in the package you expect. It shows up in a Montana rancher's steady hands, in a kitchen filled with good food and laughter, in the radical act of being seen for exactly who you are and being told, without qualification, that you're enough. More than enough everything.